因为它之前就已经是我的相机，我想说没有你的相机没有它那个气儿才去。
Right, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Quick show of hands, who was here last week? Give me a little wave. Okay, anyone who was not here last week, give me a little wave. Okay, got a few folks. Well, welcome back. Today is our second in our series of 4 Excel workshops here at the Digital Lounge. So last week we covered kind of some basics, some formatting, and kind of getting started with formulas. What we're going to do in today's session is do a little review, check back in on everything that we covered last week, and then we're going to get into some more advanced formulas. There's a set of formulas in Excel and spreadsheet tools called lookup formulas. That's what we're going to focus on today. Which will kind of gets you from the like beginner Excel user up to sort of more of an intermediate kind of Excel user. So hopefully this will be fun. For those of you who were not here last week, I've been working in the kind of data space for the last 10 years or so. I've used Excel at every single job and internship I've ever had, and worked in a bunch of different industries. So it is relevant almost no matter what you're planning to do. And I'll try to keep it really real world. So after we go over our kind of Netflix data that we looked at last week, we'll actually be looking at some fictional but realistic data from a podcast network, which is related to the kind of work that I do. I work at a podcast technology company. Cool. All right, so we are going to get right into it. The format of today is going to be very similar to the format of last week. So I'll talk a little bit, I'll give you some examples, and then you're going to have your hands on your own keyboard with your own spreadsheet open, actually working on some of these formulas. So make sure you go to the link there. That'll link you out to the little tutorial that we're going to be following for today's workshop. Cool. All right. So like I said, for today, we're really going to be focusing in on formulas. So last week we talked about formatting, we talked about data validation, we talked about some other kind of functionality in our session last week in addition to formulas. Today we're really just diving deep into formulas. It's one of the most powerful tools that you can use within Excel or Google Sheets. You're welcome to use either, again, for today's workshop. And specifically, we're really going to be getting a bunch of practice with a very powerful formula called XLOOKUP. We're also going to talk about formulas for cumulative functions as well. All right, so that's our little agenda for today. So like I said, I'm going to pick up with a little bit of that data set we were using last week. So if you were here last week and you still saved a copy of that, I'm going to be going through a little bit more with that data set today, because there's a couple more things I wanted to cover from last week. And then after we do that, we'll switch to another data set, which is, like I said, some fictionalized but realistic podcast data. Cool. So just a quick reminder for today, we're not going to be working with as many different formulas today, but we'll be revisiting some of those formulas that we used last week. So if you need a little refresher, if you don't have all the functions memorized, which I certainly don't either, what you want to do is use the formula builder, which is a little pop-up in Excel that'll give you a little reminder, a little more context about what each formula is and how to use it. So just a little reminder, you can hit view in the top bar and grab formula builder, and that'll give you a little pop-up, which will you see those details. We'll do that together as we go through, but just a little reminder. All right, so I'm going to start with revisiting the last exercise we did in our session last week, which was a row-based formula. We're doing some text formulas here to create a URL for each of these pieces of content on Netflix. So for example, we wanted to go from a title, something like Love is Blind, to a result like www.netflix.com/loveisblind. So what we did last week is we used 3 different formulas to get from point A to point B. We used the formula lower, which takes any text and returns it all lowercase. We used the formula substitute. All right, we used that also last week to swap the word films for movies in our data set. We're using it here to swap out these spaces between the words for no spaces, all right, so that our URL can be a valid URL, which has no spaces. And then the third formula we used was concatenate, which adds two pieces of text together. So it gives you one piece of text, two pieces of text, and just glues them together. So where we left off last week was we can use each of these formulas in their own cell, but we can also combine them, right? So my little sample sheet from last week. All right, so this is our data set from last week. This is our URL field. So you can see our original data set here just had our titles here in column D. All right, and then this formula that we wrote last time nested all three of those formulas that I just mentioned together. So let's take a look at my formula bar up here in the middle. I'm gonna make this a tiny bit bigger. Okay, so we can see down here where I have selected www.netflix.com/kpopdemonhunters, okay? That is the result of my formula. To see what's actually in my formula, I'm gonna look up here in my formula bar, all right? You're gonna notice a couple things about our formula bar. Our formulas always start with a what? Equal sign, yes, okay, excellent, very good. And even though I have multiple formulas in my single cell here, I'm always gonna have just the one equal sign, right? So I'm always gonna start with a one equal sign. I'm gonna go into my formula. So I'm gonna first use my concatenate formula, all right? That's gluing two pieces of text together. My concatenate formula here has two arguments, all right, two arguments. The first argument is this www.netflix.com piece of string. You'll notice it's in those double quotes. Then there's a comma, which is going to go after my first argument. And then my second argument is this entire chunk right here, this whole chunk from substitute all the way to that second to last closing bracket there, all right? So this whole thing is the second chunk of text that I'm creating with, that I'm inputting into my concatenate formula, all right? So of this whole thing, what concatenate's gonna do is it's gonna grab netflix.com, it's gonna get here, it's gonna figure out what this formula comes out to, and then it's gonna glue that onto netflix.com, all right? So it's gonna get to substitute and it's gonna say, all right, what I need to do is substitute some chunk of text. In that text, I need to substitute a space for nothing, for an empty string, no space, okay? Now, what string are we doing that substitution in? So there's three arguments going into our substitute. Our second argument is here, these quotes with a space in between. All right, our third argument is these two quotes here with no space in between, right? That's the no space we're replacing our space with. And our first argument to this function is our last function. All right, so this thing that says lower show title with the brackets, that is our last function, and that is the first argument of our substitute function. All right, so it's kind of like those dolls where you keep pulling them out and there's a smaller doll in the middle. All right, this is our third and smallest doll in that situation. Okay, so what Excel is going to do is it's going to get to this kind of middle of the nest. It's going to get here. It's going to say, all right, let me take the text of show title and apply the formula lower, make it lowercase. All right, so now I've got K-pop space, demon space, hunters, all lowercase. All right, that's what this formula is doing. Then it's going to come back out one layer. It's going to evaluate substitute. All right, so it's going to take that lowercase chunk of text, which has some spaces in it, and it's going to substitute my second argument here, which is space, for my third argument here, which is no space. All right, so then I'm going to get just an all lowercase, all one word, K-pop demon hunters. Okay. And then the very last thing it's going to do, so now that it's evaluated that whole thing, which again is my second of two arguments for my concatenate function. So now it's got that whole thing, which is just my lowercase title with no spaces, and it's just going to concatenate www.netflix.com/ onto the front of it. All right, so it's just gluing those two pieces of text together and giving me my very cool but not a functional URL, but a good example of the type of thing that you would do to create a URL. All right. Any questions about how this works with our three formulas stacked together? All right, so we will be doing a little bit more formula combining later today. So we're not gonna do it right this second, but if you are getting stuck with combining formulas ever, my very strong recommendation to you would be to just do each formula in its own column first. All right, so we did this as an exercise last time, right? Do your lowercase, make sure that comes out correctly. Do your substitute, make sure that comes out correctly. Do your concatenate, make sure that comes out correctly, and then you can start to nest them together. All right, that'll save you from some error messages, make it a little easier to figure out. All right. So we are going to talk now about combining summary formulas. So what we combined here to make our URL is a row-based formula, right? We're only referring to other cells in that same row that we're in. If I look in my formula, each of these cells is only referring back to that title in its same row, all right? So we looked a little bit at summary formulas last time. These are our formulas that are doing things like taking an average, taking a total, or taking a count, all right? So we are gonna look at two formulas that I think we ran out of time to talk about these two last week. Count if and count A. We are gonna combine them here, but just with a little bit of math. So not with as much complicated nesting as I just mentioned, okay? So first thing we're gonna do is look at the formula count if. For count if, it's just gonna count the number of titles or the number of things that meet a certain condition, okay? So you may remember last week we looked at sum if, all right? When we did our sum if, let's see if I still have it up. Yes, it's here. So my sum if, what we did last week, we added this column to our data set to say, have I seen this title? Have I seen this movie or TV show? We made a little drop-down menu to select yes or no. And then I made this little sum if that's going to say, if I've seen this piece of content, add up the number of minutes of all those pieces of content. And you'll notice that because this is a formula, it is dynamic, right? So if I come down to my little drop-down menu and I say, yes, I watched Red Notice this weekend, you'll notice my viewing time automatically updates because this piece of content is 118 minutes long. That gets added onto my viewing time there, etc. as I continue to watch more Netflix. Okay, so what's my sum if formula doing here? All it's doing is taking a few arguments. And if I want to understand, okay, I know we wrote this formula last week, but I don't totally remember what it's doing, you can do two things to give yourself a hint, a reminder, okay? One thing is you can just click in your formula bar if you have the file saved from last week of any formulas you wrote, you can click in there and most editions of Excel or Google Sheets will give you this handy pop-up that just tells you a little kind of keyword as to what each argument is. All right, so in this case, they're telling us range, criteria, and sum range. Now, if you've used this formula a little bit, you've used it recently, you might remember what those little keywords mean. This might be enough to jog your memory to kind of keep going. Or it may not. Maybe you're a little newer to this formula or you're feeling a little rusty. That's also cool. In that case, what I would recommend is that you go to your view at the top and go to Formula Builder. This is what I was talking about at the beginning. This may be in a slightly different place if you're on a PC. You should be able to get to the same thing here, which is our Formula Builder. In our Formula Builder, I can look up any formula I want to use. For example, how did that sum if formula work? What was it doing? I can search it here and get a nice handy little summary of what it's doing and specifically what arguments it takes in what order. All right, so in this case, my sum if formula adds the cells specified by a given condition or criteria. All right, not the most exciting description, but an accurate one, okay? So what does that mean? Syntax. Syntax is gonna tell me what are the inputs I give my function. Again, it's telling me range, criteria, and sum range, but it's giving me a little bit more detail as to what each of those things is. So just to do a quick review, range is the range of cells I want evaluated. All right, so what cell am I gonna compare against my criteria? In this case, I'm gonna compare my cell, have I seen it? I only care about the content that I have seen for my little tally of my personal viewing time, right? So I'm gonna be looking in this column and I only wanna deal with the content where I've marked it as yes, I have viewed it, okay? So first thing I would give it is this column, my have I seen it column. My criteria, what condition or expression am I looking for in this column? In this case, I just want the word yes. If this column says no, or if this column is blank, I don't want to add it to my viewing time, right? Because I haven't seen it. If I've seen it, it'll say yes here. And if it says yes there, I want it added up. All right. So my criteria is the value yes. All right. And then sum range are the actual cells to sum. All right. So in this case, I know that this row has a yes in it. So what do I want to add to my total? Which of my columns? Do I want to add up the hours viewed, the runtime, the views in the first 91 days globally, the runtime in minutes, right? I can tell it which of these columns I want it to draw its result value. All right, so in this case, I was doing my viewing time in minutes. So I would want my column here, runtime in minutes, to be the one that I add up. So let's go check how that compares to our sum if formula. Almost deleted it. Okay, there we go. All right, so just to look at my 3 arguments here, you'll see it's kind of doing some color highlighting them for me, which is handy because this thing that's highlighted in blue, it's giving me a quick highlight in blue of that same column. So I can do a quick visual check of whether that argument in blue and the column selected in blue are actually what I want to be using. So this is the range of cells I want evaluated. That looks correct to me because what I'm evaluating for is if that column says yes. My second argument after that comma is just the text yes. And I can look with my eyeballs and just see that that matches how I want it to be spelled. It needs to be the same capital letters and stuff. So this has a capital Y, it's looking good. And then my last thing here after my next comma, my runtime in minutes, that's going to go down and highlight that column that it's referring to just for a quick visual check. And that's going to tell me that anytime it sees yes in a row over here, it's going to come add this onto my total. So it's adding those 3 numbers together, giving me 300 something minutes. And when I evaluate that formula, I get a little over 300 minutes. Any questions about what our sum if formula is doing? All right. So we are going to try now doing a count if formula. All right. So count if you're going to be doing this one is very similar. All right. I would recommend popping open your formula builder and pulling up your count if. It's very similar to sum if, but not as complicated. It's only taking in 2 things. All right. Count if is going to take in a range and a criteria. It's going to take into account the range of cells that you want to count. It's not going to count anything blank, but as long as it's not blank, it'll look at all those cells and compare it to a criteria. All right. So what we want to do here is count if to find the number of titles that I've seen. All right. So here I have done my sum if for the number of minutes for all the titles that I've seen. But what I want to do now with my count if is make a new little chart up here. Maybe I'll give it a new little name. Number of titles I've seen, like this. And then I'm going to do my count if formula. All right. So you should start with something like equals count if. If you have your data set from last week that has a few like yes, no's in this column, that's great. You can use that. If you don't have that from last week, you on our little tutorial site, if you just pop back over to our week 1 and just download the list from here, you can use that. And all you need to do for this little exercise to work is download that data and then just make yourself a little column on the side that says yes or no in a few rows. All right, so that you can test this out. All right, so your task is to add a count if to your Excel sheet of your Netflix data that counts the number of titles you've seen. So in this case, I would want it to say 3 for me because I've marked 3 of them as yes. Okay. I'm gonna give you all a minute to attempt your count if formula. I've given you your little starter, right? This is what you should start with. So you need to figure out what range you give it for that first argument and what criteria you need to give it for that second argument. Okay, I'm gonna give everybody a minute to try that out. I just got a little like hand wave. Anybody got a count if working? Couple hands. Yeah, you want to tell us what you got?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. I got for me I got 3. I inputted 014 to 019 as the range.
Okay. And oh, I assume column O is where your have I seen it column is?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, great. So I'll select my have I seen it column, which happens to be here in column J. So I'll just select this. All
Yeah.
right.
And then I entered comma.
Comma.
And then quotation mark. Yes, and loved it. But in your case, just yes.
Yes, very good. All right, so if I put a more detailed string there, yes, I loved it, exclamation point, whatever, I would want to type that same string. I just use the simple string yes, so I'll do that here. That totally works. And I've done it in double quotes because my text has got to be in double quotes. So I was very picky about that. Very good. Anything else?
And then you gotta close the bracket.
All right, close the bracket. Very good. Okay, perfect. Turns out I too have also seen 3 titles. All right. So here is my formula again. All right, so that first argument is the range of cells that it's looking at. That's what it's referring to with this range. I'm just going to go and select this here. Again, you'll see, remember last week we did the format as table option on our data right when we started. All right, so up here in our formatting ribbon, we had done this format as table option here in the upper right. That creates some nice kind of dynamic table behavior in Excel, where it's giving me this top list per bracket all thing. That's the same thing, the range of cells that your classmate described here is just selecting the range. That also works depending on the version of Excel and depending on whether or not you format it as a table. You may see just your cell range with a colon, or you may see a little name like this. They're the same, they're doing the same thing in this situation. All right, did anybody get an error message with their count if? Anybody have an error message? Anybody get the wrong number? Did you get a number here, but it's not the number you were expecting? No? Okay, great.
I just had a question.
Yeah.
So, in the pull down menu,
Mhm.
we have 3 options. One was yes, like I'll just tell you what I've given.
Mhm.
One is yes, it was all right. Yes, it was amazing.
Mhm.
And no, I haven't seen it.
Okay.
Right. So when I'm putting the count if option, I have selected it was amazing. So
Mhm.
I've only selected 2. I think only 2 films were yes, it was amazing.
Yep.
But what if I want to add the yes, it was all right as well, because those are also films that I've watched. So how do I add that into the formula?
Absolutely. Great question. And that is going to be a very simple combination of formulas. So if this is how we count if our, so imagine this is my like, yes, I loved it, right? Imagine I have those same three options as you. You counted your I loved it ones. How would you separately count those ones that are, yes, it's okay?
Yeah.
You would count those with a similar formula, right? You would do
Right.
count if, that same column, and then just give it the
Other
criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what I would do to get what you're saying, which is the total of those things, is I would copy paste this part. I'm gonna copy this whole thing I just wrote. Come down to the end, stick a little plus sign on here. Pop that back in. And then I would just change this. In this case, my only other option is no, so I'll do that as a little demo. Pop in no, and that didn't change my number because I didn't have any as no, but let's see if I add a no. Now it'll crank up to 4. If I add another yes, it'll crank up to 5. So now it's counting either of those conditions. So excellent question. That is a sort of a simple combination of formulas. Yeah, there's probably other ways to do that as well, but this is maybe the most straightforward. Yeah, good question. Okay, any other questions about count if? Okay, fabulous. All right, next thing we are going to do, correct screen. Okay, we just had a little preview of combining formulas with math. We're gonna do a very similar combination to that. So we've counted the number of titles that we've seen. Next thing we're gonna do is find out what percent of all these titles that is, all right? So luckily for us, this is pretty simple math. If I come over to this sheet, I could come down here. There's not that many rows of data, right? I could figure out that goes from row 12 to row 52, that there are 40 rows of data filled out here. So if I've seen, 4 or 5 of the 40, I could figure out that percentage, right? I would do some division. I could come in here to my count if. I'll make a copy of this. I don't lose it. Come in here and get this new little label. I'm going to call this percent of titles I've seen. All right, and I would be doing a similar formula here. So in this case, I'm just going to go back to my single count if, my yes, and I could do some division by our total number of titles. So I've got my count here, and I'm just adding at the end slash, which is my just mathematical division. And I know there's 40 titles, so I could just type in 40. All right. This is going to give me a percentage, almost. It's probably not going to format it as a percentage for me the first time. I can come up, if it doesn't do that for you, it may do it automatically. If it does not, you can come up here into your home ribbon in the middle in the formatting section and grab your percent style button, which is right here. Slow right now. Let's try it in here. Okay, great. And that's going to update this. 0.1 is the same thing as 10%. All right, that's going to tell me that I've seen 10% of titles. Okay, now we're going to do one last thing, which is combine this with one more formula. All right. So to get that there were 40 films, I just went and looked with my eyeballs to see how many films there are. But in a large data set, that's not practical, right? Or if it's a shared data set where people might be adding things, you don't want to just type in 40 because if someone adds one more film to this list tomorrow, my percentage will be wrong, right? So I want to replace this 40 with a formula that's going to tell me how many films there are, right? So what I'm going to do for that is use another formula called count A, and I'm going to replace in my formula bar here where I've typed the number 40, I'm going to replace it with this other formula, count A. All right, so I'm going to pull it up in my formula builder so you can see what it is. And this is a pretty simple formula. It counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty. Okay, I'm going to do this formula in a separate cell first, which again is what I would recommend you do as you're starting to learn how to combine formulas. So maybe I'll make just another little option over here, and I'm going to call this total number of titles. All right, and this is where I'm going to test out my count A. So I'm going to come in here and do an equal sign. I'm going to do count A. And what values am I going to give it? I want to give it a range of values. And specifically for this function, I want to give it a range of values that may or may not be blank. And it's going to count of all those cells, which ones are not blank. Okay. So in this case, I want it to count titles. So I'm going to come over here to my show title column. I'm going to start here and I'm going to go all the way down. Now, in this case, I'm going to go way down further than I actually have data. All right, so this includes several blank rows. That's okay for this formula because it's not gonna count anything that's blank. All right, and then I'm gonna hit enter. Okay, so this formula function is only taking one argument, and that argument is a range of cells. Remember, anytime you see that colon between two cell references, that means it's the full range, that cell and everything in between. So this is saying it's looking in rows 13 all the way down to row 102. And how many titles did it find there? It's giving me 40, which is great because those are the cells that contain the titles, which are not blank. All right, so even though I'm going all the way down to row 100 in my reference, those other ones are blank below my 40th one, they're blank, so it's not going to count them. Okay. This is especially like the sort of thing you might want to set up if you can imagine you have a collaborative Google sheet for this and you have everybody adding their favorite movie to the list. People might come in and edit it later. So you would want to select a little bit further down so that in case data gets added, your formula is taking it into account. Now, let's say someone adds a ton of movies to this list. They add a movie, they've added so many that they put another movie in row 103 in this sheet. My formula is only checking down to 102. So again, it would kind of run out of steam there, right? So I have the number of titles that I've seen. I have my total number of titles. And then I did my percentage earlier by combining my count if just with some simple math. But I want to do one more thing. I still want my answer to be 10%. I still want to get this same result. But instead of 40, I want to put in my count A formula that I just wrote. All right. I'll make a copy of this just so you can see it. All right. Just call this percent of titles again. All right. So here I'm going to do same thing that I did before. All right, so it's my same old count if, looking at yes, all that. And then after my division line, so I've removed my 40. So my count if, I've closed my brackets, I've got my slash for division. I'm gonna do my count A. All right, so I'm gonna put in that same count A formula that I just did. I came over here, I selected a range of cells starting from my first title, all the way down to get some blank ones in there. And then I'm gonna close my brackets. All right, so this is another combination of formulas, but they're just being combined with math in the middle, same way we had the plus sign in between for the two different types of yes. In this case, we're just doing some division to get the percentage, okay? One other thing to note, this first formula I wrote in all caps, the second formula, count A, I did not write in all caps. They both work. It's convention in Excel to write them in all caps, but I admittedly don't do that, and they also work, so up to you. All right. So I'm going to hit enter and I'm going to get my percentage again. So I'm still getting my 10%, or in this case, my 0.1. I'll come back up here and format as a percent. So I'll get my 10% to show up that way. And I could do some little snazzy formatting stuff again with these if I wanted to just display my little 10%. And the great part about having this with two formulas is that now it's going to update no matter what happens to my data. So let's say I spend this weekend watching a bunch more Netflix. So I've seen a few more titles. We see my percent ticking up here in both cases. My count of titles ticking up here, all good. And then let's say some other piece of content comes up. Let's call it new cool movie. All right, that drops on Netflix, added to the top list. I can come over and check my percentages. All right, so now what we're noticing is that this total number of titles here is 41. This percentage down here is still dividing by 40, all right, because this is the one where I've typed it in. This one is still dividing by that same count, so it's looking at column D, which is where I've just added that new movie title. All right, and so it is decimal points around. When I do the decimal places, you can see it a little better. I've actually seen 14.6% of all the movies when there are 41 of them. All right, so that's just the difference between having the formula in the second part of this one versus just typing in a static number. Okay, any questions about how we combine the count if and the count A? getting an error message. Okay. So that is sort of wrapping where we left off last week. So we did a bunch of row-based formulas. We did text, we did math, we did date formulas. All right, and then we did some summary formulas. We did combining formulas. So that was a little kind of mostly review. All right, review plus. So now we're going to get into the meat of our topic for today, which is advanced formulas. So we're going to switch to a totally new data set. So you can save, close your Netflix data set, and we are going to grab a new data source, which is, if you have our little thing open here and you're following along, you're going to go down to where it says advanced formulas, and there's a link to a SharePoint file. As long as you're logged in with your USC login, you can download a copy. Right, so it'll look something like this. You won't be able to edit it here, but you should download a copy so that you can edit it yourself. So you can come here to File, create a copy, and then I would recommend downloading if you have the desktop app for Excel, because the web one is a little slow at times. But you can also totally do it online and use the 365 online version of Excel. You can also copy this into a Google Sheet and do it that way if you'd rather. Right? Anyone have any issues accessing this link? Did anyone successfully get it? Not or something. All right. Great. So here's your link. We're under advanced formulas. This is the data set that we're going to switch to. Again, that link should work as long as you're logged in with your USC Microsoft. And you could go here, if you missed at the beginning, go to grab the link that way. Okay. People good on the link. People need another minute. All right, so we're going to get into our next kind of set of formula concepts. The most important of which for today is XLOOKUP. So to explain XLOOKUP, we're going to talk about a little scenario, old coffee shop. All right. So you're going to imagine that you're an employee at this coffee shop and you have two things. You have a list of all the orders from that day. All right. So order number 1 was a coffee and a latte. Order number 2 was a mocha and a hot chocolate. Order number 3, et cetera. Right. You have that information. And then of course you have your menu, right? So you have that a coffee is $4 and a latte is $6, et cetera. Right. And you want to find out how much money the cafe made today. Right. So from those two pieces of information to solve that problem just yourself, you would need to go through this process, right? You would look at each order. You would say, all right, first order is a coffee. Then you go find that item on the menu and you'd be like, all right, coffee's $4. So there's a 4 here, all right? Next item is a latte. Go check the menu. The latte is $6. I'll add a 6. I'll keep on going all the way down my list and then I'll total up those numbers. All right, so I'm essentially going over to another reference data source for all of those things. So it might look something like this. All right, here's my order number, here's my orders, and then here's my menu with my prices. Okay. Questions, issues so far? Okay. All right. So what I would do here, right, is I'm just matching from this sheet based on whatever the item is called. So if someone orders a cappuccino, that's $6.50. Second cappuccino is another $6.50. Matcha latte, $6. Right? I would be sort of adding that information. All right. So this is the type of question, this sort of problem where you're trying to match information is a really good use case for the formula XLOOKUP. So what XLOOKUP does is it searches for a value, which you can think of as your key. It goes and searches for that value in another range. And then it returns any value from that range that kind of corresponds to that key, which in Excel means that it's just in that same row. All right. So this is the same thing that we just did with our coffee shop menu. All right. I have my key here as cappuccino. I'm going to come over and look for it in my menu. When I find it, I'm going to grab a corresponding value. I'm going to tell it I want the value from the price column, and that'll bring my price over. All right, so these are my 4 arguments for a lookup, for an X lookup specifically. Okay, so I'm gonna give it that value. What is my key that I want it to go find? I'm gonna give it an array, meaning a column. So what column should I go look for that key in? I'm gonna tell it which column it should look for my results in. So this would be my price column, my copy. All right, and then if you don't find it, if someone has ordered something off menu and there's no price listed, what should you return in that case? Should you give a 0? Should you have some text that says it's not found? This is optional, but sometimes can be helpful to know whether or not something is in a list. All right, so let's go through a little example of this one. Okay, let's sheet this open. All right, we'll do a quick update here. So we'll say coffee. Okay, makes it a tiny bit bigger. Okay, so here is sort of a simple version of my order history. And then over here, I'm gonna put my menu, which is gonna say coffee, and then price, which is gonna say $4. Do a hot cocoa. Tea next. Tea is $3.50, more cheaper than coffee. All right. Okay, so here's what I would do to get my prices onto my order list. All right. So I would add a column here. I'm going to give it a title. You should always give your columns a title. I might call it something like item price. And this is where I'm going to use my X lookup. Now I'm going to look it up in my little formula builder as a little reminder. And give me a little heads up of what these arguments are going to be. But as always, I'm going to start with my equal sign. I'm going to do X lookup. Okay. Open parentheses. So what value do I want to go look up in my menu? In this case, I want to go look up the specific item's name, right? For this row, I just want to know how much is a cup of coffee. So this lookup value, my key is just this single cell. All right, so I can click on it or grab it with my arrow keys. All right. Then I'm going to do a comma, move on to my second argument. All right, this is a lookup array. What column do I want to go look for my key in? In this case, it's going to be my menu description column. So this column I, all right. I'm just going to go ahead and select this whole column in this case. Maybe my menu gets really long. It's one of those coffee shops with like 500 drink options. All right, I'm going to select this whole column. All right, I'm going to do another comma. If you go to my third argument, which is my return array, where is the column that I want information returned from? Column J, yes, because I want the price, right? So in this case, I'm just going to select my entire column J. All right, now I can see in my little kind of pop-up hint here that it looks like there's actually 6 arguments for this function, right? I've typed in 3, but there's 3 more. Now, these 3, if you notice in our little handy pop-up, are in square brackets, which means they are optional. The function will work without them. They just add a little bit of extra functionality, for lack of a better pun. Okay, so I can just use these 3 arguments. I can close my parentheses there and I can hit enter. All right, that is going to copy the value. All right, so it's going to say, where is coffee in column I, and return me the thing in column J that corresponds to coffee. All right, it's going to give me that value, but not that formatting. All right, so it's giving me the number 4 instead of $4. So I can come over here and format that as currency myself if I want to. All right, so it's going to copy the value, but not the format. All right, now I'm going to copy this formula down my order history table here. All right, a couple ways I can do this. I can select this cell and do copy paste. I can grab the little tiny corner here. You see when my little cursor changes from a white plus sign to a dark plus sign right here. Once that happens, I can drag it all the way down. Or my personal favorite is I can double click and it'll just kind of be smart and just go right down to where the data in the adjacent column ends. All right, so it's a little handy way to kind of fill it in. All right, so to figure out how much money my cafe made from these 3 orders, I'm going to notice a couple of things. So I got my coffee price, $4. Excellent. Got my tea price, $3. Excellent. Now let's look at the formula in our tea row. So in our first row, it was going to look at cell B2, that's where my coffee is, then go look at all of column I and return me the thing from all of column J, all right? When I copied pasted it down, it now says B3 as my first argument, meaning grab whatever's in cell B3, this in this case T, go look that up in column I and return whatever corresponds to that in column J. All right, so this reference moves down with me. So in row 2, this is B2. In row 3, this is B3. And in row 4, this is B4. All right, so that's where it's being smart. It's moving down with me with that cell reference. Okay. Now, what is going on here? Why am I getting an error message next to hot cocoa instead of a price?
Contain the hot cocoa.
Yes, amazing. Okay, so there's no hot cocoa on the menu. All right, so it cannot find a price. So it's giving me this little error message. So this is the case where I might want to use that third argument in my function, which is what to do if it's not found. In this case, instead of that weird NA thing, I might want to give it a nice piece of text like not on the menu. Helpful like that. All right, so when I add that onto my formula, now this formula has 4 arguments, those same first 3, and then just the piece of text not on the menu. Now, whenever it can't find it, it'll give me that instead of my error. Okay, I'm actually gonna copy this up so it's the same formula in all my cells. Okay, now a couple of cool things I can do at this point. One thing is that I can add stuff to my menu. So let's say I want to add hot cocoa. I can spell hot cocoa. I want to do that. Here's something interesting. My error message went away, right? So it's found hot cocoa in column I, but there's no value in column J, so it's returning a 0. Okay, so it's not that it's not on the menu, but it's returning a 0. I could add a price. Maybe it's really fancy hot chocolate. It's $7. Okay. Currency just to match. All right, and then as soon as I update that over here, we're good. Got my $7 coming over here. Now, let's say next person comes in, order number 4, and they order a tea. Great, I can just keep dragging my formula right on down. All right, so my tea came in at $3.50 again, looks great. This person number 4 also ordered a coffee, but I typed it into the computer wrong. All right, so I typed in coffee, maybe I misspelled it. All right, so it's looking for coffee with 1 F in the menu. It's not finding it, and it's going to say not on the menu, right? Because it's matching on this exact text of the item, matching whatever's in our column I. Fix that by just coming in here and spelling coffee correctly, and it'll grab my $4. Any questions about how we're getting the price from here to here? General idea makes sense. Seeing a few nods. All right. One other thing I'll mention about our formula builder, again, depending on which edition of Excel you have, once you're already working on a formula, it may pop up in this view, which is essentially a little, it's like it's making you a little form for how to fill out the fields of your formula. So you'll notice here in my formula bar, I have B6 comma, column I comma, column J comma, a little bit of text. Here it's separating those into these 4 fields. It's essentially letting me edit my formula in more of a sort of screen view. I could come in here and make any edits that I wanted to. I could say I wanted this to be column K, for example. I could have it select column K. I want to keep it as column J. I don't use this that much because once you get a little bit going with formulas, it's typically easier to just type them all out with your commas. But if you like this view, or if it's helpful for a formula you haven't seen before, you can also use that. Again, once you like start typing it, that will pop up. Okay. Yeah.
For some odd reason, the XLOOKUP formula is not working. Like it's not showing up for me on my Excel.
Okay. Is there any chance you have an older version of Excel?
I think it's 29.
Yes. Okay. Very good question. Yes. Older versions of Excel will not work with XLOOKUP. There's an older function called VLOOKUP, which
Yeah,
definitely,
we look up there.
okay, have you used a VLOOKUP before?
Oh, no.
It's very similar. I would recommend, I think through USC you can download the newest Excel package, so I would recommend that. VLOOKUP is very similar. It's gonna be a little bit fussier. We can look up, I'll show you, I actually used to teach VLOOKUP in this class. And someone came up to me at the end of class and asked me why I was teaching VLOOKUP if we now have XLOOKUP. I said, that's an excellent point, and I stopped teaching VLOOKUP. So I appreciate everyone's feedback. But VLOOKUP is, some people still use it out of habit. The habit I'm working to break, but I sometimes still use it out of habit. And you may see it in, like, it's common at workplaces to have like a massive Google sheet or a massive spreadsheet that's being passed around. So what is VLOOKUP? VLOOKUP is very similar. It does this exact same function, but it's a little fussier. So just for the purposes of explaining how to understand formula syntax, we'll do this as a little example. So I can get my item price with VLOOKUP as well. VLOOKUP. And this will also work, anyone who has the new version of Excel, if XLOOKUP works just fine, VLOOKUP will work for you as well. I can do a VLOOKUP. And this is going to take a similar set of arguments. So my arguments here are going to be what value, what's that key value I want to go look up. So it's the same thing. I'm grabbing here. But then instead of giving it two columns, my lookup column and my return column, it's instead going to take a table and then a column number. Meaning you're going to give it a table. So in this case, the table that I will give it is my whole menu here. So both of these columns. And then I could even just give it full columns, just I to J to be similar to how I did it before. And then it's going to assume, VLOOKUP is making the assumption that your key is going to be in the first column of that table. So your columns have to be in a certain order. This is why it can be a little annoying. And then it says, what number column of this table do you want to go look at? In this case, it's number 2, because this is column 1. What thing do you want return is in column 2. So I'll simply give it a 2. And I'll close my brackets and it will grab that same price. We can come on down and it will work the same way. If I misspell my coffee, it'll do my little error message, etc. Right? So it's doing the same thing, but because your columns have to be in a certain order, it's a little annoying. Once you get used to XLOOKUP, it's hard to go back. It's hard to go back. But you certainly can if you need to. All right. Make sense? All right. So we are going to do some practice with XLOOKUP. One last note I'm going to tell you before that is that XLOOKUP will return the first match that it finds when it goes and looks for that key. What that means is that if you have a case where you're going to have multiple values in that column that it's looking for, it's a good idea to sort it in a logical way for how you're using it. All right, this will make sense in an example in a second, but just want to make sure everyone remembers how to sort our data. So I'm going to come over here to our mock podcast data. Everybody should have this open. All right, and you should notice a few tabs going on or a few sheets within this workbook. We got a few pieces of information. We have shows, episodes, campaign participation, and personal endorsement. Okay, anyone have any issues downloading the sheet? We all got it? Okay, great. All right, so just to do a little explaining of what this data is, each row in our shows sheet is an individual podcast, right, with a few pieces of information. So it's got an ID number, it's got a first name, last name, email, presumably of the person who hosts it. It's got a title. These are fictional podcasts, so it's fake titles, obviously. It's got the monthly downloads of that podcast. So how many downloads does that show get every month? Got a few empty things we're going to fill in, and it's got its content category, right? Is it true crime, comedy, etc. Okay. Our episodes table, each row is an individual episode of any of those shows on the other tab. So first thing here is an ID, even though it's also labeled ID. We're using the context clue of this being a different sheet to tell us that this is the ID of the episode. Right, so we're on this tab, ID is the ID of the show. Here On our episodes tab, ID is the ID of the episode. A few pieces of information about that episode, the ID of the show it's related to, what data was uploaded, the MP3 like file name, and how many minutes long that audio is. Okay. My campaign participation tab, this is going to be one row for each show participating in each campaign. All right, so if we take a look here, we have our campaign ID, our campaign name. So this is a DoorDash ad campaign. I have the ID of the show that's participating. And then I have the CPM. This is the price of how these ads are sold on podcasts and other media. I'll explain this in a second when we do some math. And then we're going to fill in some more formulas on this sheet. All right, so we've got podcasts, we've got episodes, we've got which of those shows are participating in which ad campaigns. Okay. And then we have personal endorsement. So this is going to tell us for each of our ad campaigns, is the host required to personally endorse the product? Meaning, does the host have to say, I wear my Nike shoes and I love them? That is what a personal endorsement would be. Or can they do the ad without a personal endorsement? Meaning, aren't Nike shoes so great? You should buy a pair. But I didn't say anything about whether I personally wear or endorse them. Okay, any questions about what our data is? Yeah.
So CPM.
Yes, I will come back to the CPM in a second when we do some math. It's the way advertisements are priced. Okay, great. So we are going to try out our XLOOKUP skills, take XLOOKUP for a spin on our shows sheet in our workbook. All right. So you're going to go into your show sheet. I already have a little tab for you called upload date. That says your formula here in yellow. That is where you are going to try out an XLOOKUP formula. All right. Specifically, we want to add to our shows data what is the most recent episode upload, like what is the most recent episode date for that show. Meaning if I have show number 1 here, if I were just doing this by hand, I would want to go over to my episodes tab. I would want to scroll down until I see a show ID number 1. It's a bunch of shows in this network, so I'd probably have to scroll for a long time. Find my show number 1. Looks like there was an episode uploaded on February 6th. So I want February 6th to show up here as my upload date. Okay. So you should have an XLOOKUP formula right here that goes and looks for the most recent upload date of the episode. Now, this gets back to the sorting comment that I just made, meaning it'll grab that first value that it finds. So we might assume that for our episode data, each podcast probably has multiple episodes. So I might want to sort these first by date before I find my XLOOKUP. As a little reminder of how I might want to do that, I can come in here if I've already got it filtering, and I can just do sort by ascending or descending. Descending for dates is going to give me the most recent first. So that's probably what I would want to do here. If I don't already have it filtering, I can come up, I can select all my data. Just grab a little cell here and do Command A if I'm on a Mac. And then I would come up here and do sort and filter and custom sort. And then I would just choose to sort by date and whether I wanted newest to oldest or oldest to newest. All right, so make sure you take care of that sorting first, and then you're going to add an XLOOKUP to your shows tab under your upload date, your little placeholder that I made for you. All right, and you're going to get that, use XLOOKUP to find the most recent episode upload for that show. Make sense? All right. So I'm going to give you a minute to try this. I want you to open up your formula builder and look at XLOOKUP. Give yourself a little refresher of what are those 3 pieces of information that you need to give it. All right, and so think about where each of those pieces of information is in your podcast data. All right, what's that key that you're going to look up? Where's the column that you want to look it up in? And where's that value that you want to return? Okay, I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes to work on that. I'm going to kind of float around. So if you're stuck, getting an error message, give me a little wave and I'll come help. Cool.
How do we open the formula builder on Windows again?
Oh, it should be somewhere under view, probably. Oh, I think it might be, is it this little down arrow next? Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Not what we can do open phone.
Yeah, I think next to the FX is a little down arrow. Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so it's the insert function, okay.
Yeah. First, but it looks like you might be sorting by the ID column. These aren't dates, so you want to do your little, yeah, you want to do your little sort on your date column instead, which is your columns. Nice. And then descend it. Yep, there you go. Perfect. Yeah, no
这个我其实没为什么英文的我不记得
Anyone have an X lookup working? Here?
X lookup equal sign X lookup
Alright, equals X lookup.
parentheses at a just the whole first column
First column, so for me that cell A2 here.
and then comma and then we go into the episode sheet and then it's the B column
Yep, going to my episode sheet, grab my column B,
and then a comma and then the column C.
and I'm grabbing column C because my third argument here is what I want to return, right? So I'm taking that show ID that's in cell A2. I want to look it up in column B over on this sheet. And then I want to return the corresponding thing in column C on this sheet. Very good. Anything else?
And then just the ending parentheses.
All right, closing my parentheses. Very good. Okay, now the result I got, zoom in a little bit here, is 4, 5, 6, 9, 8. Did anyone else get this result or something like this? Just me? Okay, in case this happened to you, this is a data formatting issue. So even though the data in column C is formatted as a date, this column where I put my formula is not. So it's not recognizing the date, so it's freaking out, all right? I believe it's in fact giving you the number of days since like January 1st, 2000 or something, like not useful. So all I'm gonna do is come into my form number formatting menu and change it to short date from general or number. Once I do that, it magically updates to February 10th. So for this one, you would give it the table of show ID to upload date. So you give it that range BC, and then the column would be 1, 2, your second column. Yeah, so you give it A2, B to C as your table, and then column 2. Is it giving you a number or is it giving you an error?
Give me an error. Let me just try again.
All right, cool. All right. Everybody clear on how I got my date to appear here? Any questions about that? Yeah.
And I have some rows that says.
Okay, great. You have some rows where it's working and some rows are not. Great. So let's try that up here. I'm gonna copy my formula all the way down. Okay. Now I'm getting some errors and some where it's pulling the date, just like you. All right, anybody else getting this? Okay. So what does it mean? What does it mean that I have an NA here? Yeah.
No, there's no episodes that relate to that are for that show.
Exactly. And there's no episodes that relate to this show. So what Excel tried to do is it said, all right, show ID number 4, right? Since I'm in row 4, let's go over and look in our episodes table. Let's see if we can find a number 4 in here. There's a bunch of numbers with 4 in it, but no individual 4. All right. That means there was no episode uploaded for this show in whatever data this means. So it's actually not a problem with my formula. It's a problem with my data, or perhaps my problem with my podcaster that was supposed to have uploaded an episode and did not. Okay. So this is a great example of a case where it might be more helpful, right? Because let's say you're doing this data project and your boss looks at this sheet. Your boss might, if they don't use Excel very often, might think, oh, you've got some errors in your formula. Like you've made a mistake here. In fact, you have not, but there's no data where you're looking for it. So this is a great place to add this 4th optional argument, if not found, to put some descriptive text. So that I might put something, if I were preparing this for my less tech savvy boss, I might put something in here like no episode uploaded, right? So like, what is the context meaning of a missing data point there? And then I'll copy this all the way down. Window out of the way here. I'll copy this updated formula all the way down. And now all the places that used to have the weird #NA thing now just have some useful text that actually says specifically what's going on. All right. And all I did to add that was just I added a comma after my 3rd argument, my function. Then I added whatever text in quotes I wanted to show up. I highly recommend, especially if you're doing an XLOOKUP on a sheet that anybody else is ever going to look at, I highly recommend just putting something that makes sense in that 4th argument, just a couple words explaining what it means. In this case, that no episode was uploaded or that we don't have a record of it for some reason, makes it a lot easier for someone else to understand what's going on with your. Yeah, question?
What are the 5th and 6th arguments?
Yes. All right. So in XLOOKUP, we have a few others. These are not going to be very frequently used. You can get a little description in your formula lookup here. There's a few different modes it can operate in. So as I mentioned, when we were looking at our coffee menu, it's looking at an exact spelling match. There's a way to put it into a mode where it's more of a fuzzy match, if you will. So it's not looking at exact spelling or exact capitalization. I personally don't find any real world use for that, because if it's not an exact match on the email address or whatever I'm using, like, it's probably not useful to me. So I don't find that to be very real world useful, but you can do that. And then search mode, as I was mentioning, it's gonna look for that first value that it finds in the sheet. Technically, you could switch that and have it look for the latest value, like have it look from the bottom up instead of the top down. Again, that's not the most real world useful. I usually find it much more straightforward to go sort my data just according to whatever business logic, and then just sort of use the default. Yeah. All right, let's take a quick look at your VLOOKUP. You're missing your first argument in your VLOOKUP. You're not giving it a key to your first argument is column B. First argument before you even go to your episodes tab is what key is it looking for? You need something there, not in your episodes tab. What key are you looking for? What on this sheet are you going to use to go look? The date's what I'm going to return. How am I going to go find the date? Am I going to go look up the podcast title on another sheet? So how do I know that an episode goes to the show? Like what connects those two pieces? We go back to our episode. What piece of information here tells you show? These are episodes for all those. Right? Show like this first episode, which show? Yes. Okay, great. So you can imagine my lookup formula in row 128. The key that it would want to look up is that show ID. And then you want to go find it in column B and return the thing in the second column. Right? So you need to tell it that first piece, which is the show ID. So you go back to your, back to your. Yeah, so you need to say, just go look for that ID in just in this row. Right? Yep, that's your first argument. And then you all it's doing is auto-populating shows just because you're recommending it may or not do that. Enter. Okay.
26号到对他不上课，他说
And
不
you
上
go
课。
to
这个是
you can just copy this down always.
他是会说的，但是好长啊。但是我看那个说他看他有的是，所以这个就行，这样不然的话就是
All right, we're getting touched.
骗一学期先去，然后回来再去。我觉得或者我是在 Vegas 待1周。
All right, any other questions about XLOOKUP? Any other errors over here? Yeah.
这儿去3号，10度。哦，10月9号到4日是休假。才去的。看了剧然后吵架。
Yeah, so are you trying to use XLOOKUP or did you want to use VLOOKUP?
也可以。
You don't have XLOOKUP, okay. Yeah, you want X or V. Yeah, so if you don't have X, that's fine. Although I think through USC you can download the newest Excel, and I would highly recommend that. So VLOOKUP's a little different. You're going to need to select that whole table that you're looking at. So B in this case, column C and C.
Just the design.
So you're going to want to select actually column B and column C. Yep, and then a comma. Oh, just don't do that. Click back. So go back to your episodes. Yep. Okay. And then and then just hit comma on your keyboard.
我家隔壁嘛。对。
Great.
那晚今天我给 speaker 他改进了。
他设计我家旁边荒了。
You're gonna hit your comma and then you're gonna tell it to go look in column 2 of that. So just give it the number 2. Yep, and try that. Okay. Oh, just looks like we lost that last one. Oh, looks like you got an extra lookup. So we only need one VLOOKUP. You can get a regular lookup. And that should. Alright, see what it does. So that's an extra. Just get rid of that extra bracket. Okay, cool. Getting there. All right.
不是
他们说是懂的人
是不是那人已经这个是
那人
后面
后面
It might be in number formatting,
That's
so I
good.
formatted
第一个
text.
第一个是
但如果说是那个人
Yeah,
是
so formatted, yeah, do format as number.
是不是？
这个我就还是不会想
对
好像可以是
对象来说
这
就是
这个我知道，
Yeah, so for that column, just the show ID, format, no, just the show ID. But it's the show ID.
对
Yeah.
不是换位，是他们那个反应。
Okay, she was having the same issue. I'll come back to you again later. Google Sheets also has XLOOKUP, so if you want to try XLOOKUP, you can just pop the whole data in Google Sheets right there as well.
第二的那个地方为什么在说？
哦，对对
Okay, any other questions?
对。
他那个早
其实它这个 ID 是这个意思，它那个是这个就是这个这个我觉得是它需要。
We got some folks at different points. All right, we got some XLOOKUP working, we got some VLOOKUP attempts. All right. If lookup formulas are new to you, they definitely take a little bit of time to get your head around. Okay. So if you're feeling a little stuck, if you're trying to debug your XLOOKUP formula, I recommend thinking back to our coffee example. Okay, meaning of the data I'm looking at, what is the key I need to go look up in my menu? What's my menu column I want to look in? And what's my result column I want to return? Okay, so try to map back to your coffee example if you get stuck. What's your item name? What is the analog to your item name in this situation? Where's your menu column and where's your price column? All right, those are the three things that you're looking for. All right, we are gonna do a couple more XLOOKUP examples because this is the sort of thing where you need to get kind of a few reps to sort of have it feel a little bit more intuitive. So I have a few more placeholders for formulas on your sheet. All right, we are gonna add some columns to our campaign participation tab. And again, they're both gonna use XLOOKUP. Okay, so this is the third tab in your sheet, campaign participation. We're gonna do two things. The first thing is that we want our show title to appear on this sheet. This sheet already has a column for show ID, that's in column C, but my show titles are not included, right? They're only in my other shows tab. So I want to use an XLOOKUP here under show title to actually populate the show title on this sheet. All right. So for that example, I'm going to do the same thing for personal endorsement. That's our second one. So if you're feeling good about XLOOKUP, you want to go ahead, you can jump into these two. Personal endorsement is my last tab here, and it's a piece of information about each campaign. Okay, so each of these columns is going to have an XLOOKUP formula. You should start with the show title one. If I wanted to look up my show title here, what is my key? What piece of information from this row would I go use to find the title in that other sheet? Show ID, and specifically the cell C2. All right, just that one show ID. My key is one piece of information. All right, so I grab C2. Where is my menu equivalent? Where is my list that I would be matching my show ID against? Where would I find that column? And then my last piece of information is where is my price list? Okay, so if I've gone and looked at my show on the menu or my coffee on the menu, all right, I've matched it. I have an ID. I would want to go look that up in wherever I have all the show ID information. And then the price or the title that I want to get back in this situation, where is that stored? Right, so the first thing I give it is a key, an individual key. And the next two pieces of information are columns about where it should go look and where it should give me information from. All right, so that's my show title. We're also going to do one for personal. Get stuck, getting an error, give me a little wave. VLOOKUP people Coming back to you. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's totally fine. That's a good way to get them. There's a fourth argument, which is true false, which is whether or not it's gonna do the fuzzy match. So if you wanna try like. Okay, there, and just do the word. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. There you go. Okay, that was our issue. Okay, now you can format that as a date. Bar if you're here. Yeah, general. Here's what we look up. Okay. Have a solution for you, which is, oh, sorry, were you right in the middle? Did you get your other one to work? Your other one from before? Okay, I was gonna show you how to get that one to work. So let's go back to our shows tab. You can just hit escape to that. Yeah, perfect. Okay, back to your shows. Go back to the oh no, we lost it. Okay, so yeah, so let's do a fresh VLOOKUP in there. All right. Great. D, very good. Yes. Yep. Memory. Okay, and then the fourth argument here, I have forgotten that this is required. I was gonna use the options. Do one more comma. Those are your column 2, and then one more comma. There's one more thing. This is that fuzzy match versus exact match thing I was talking about earlier. You have to set that. I would always set it to false. Most use cases. Yep. And then hit enter or G let's back. Yep. All right, there you go. And now you got to format it as a date. So you full general. Swap it over to a date. There you go. So you just got to put that false at the end of that. Right. Does anyone have a title showing up on your campaign participation tab? Anyone got the title? A little stuck? You got it? You got it? All right. What are you not doing? Okay, very interesting. All right. So typically your lookup array and return array should be on the same this sheet. Okay. Yeah, so this is where it gets a little tricky. So shows, see how this says I here? That first column? Did it say show ID? ID on the shows tab. So it's safe, that's the same as show ID. That's the interesting. So this is that column in your formula. So it should be, yeah, like your lookup array and rows array, return array should both be in your shows. Yep. But go to your shows, come over your shows tab. Alright, so your title is in which column? Here, column B, you've already got that. And then where's the ID?
Yeah, how cool.
Yeah, just which column is the ID in? A, perfect. Okay, so shows column A should be your second argument. Here instead of, yeah, because it should be in that same, yeah, so you just switch that to shows and column A. Yeah. Great. There you go. So it wasn't giving you an error before, but basically what it was doing is it was finding whichever row their episode is going to be in and returning the show title that happened to be in that same row on some other sheet, which isn't super cool. Right, so you want it to be in the same. Okay, cool. All right. Can you tell us what you got for your? All right, what you got?
So the lookup value, it should be the C2.
C2. All right, I'm grabbing C2 because this is my key. This is the thing that I'm going to go look up in that other sheet. All right.
And the lookup error is on the shows.
Yep, I'm gonna go to my shows tab here, and where am I gonna go look for my show ID? In my show ID column. All right, so where is my column that has all of my show IDs? It's here. So I'm just clicking over and you'll notice I'm just grabbing this one with my mouse and my formula bar is telling me shows exclamation point. That just means it's referencing this other sheet. Okay, very good.
And the return error is shows.
Perfect. All right, I have a comma and then my return array. So my lookup array and my return array should always be in the same sheet, right? Because what I want it to do is look for the ID and then just go grab the matching value, right? So in this case, that is going to be my column E here. That's where my titles are living. All right, good. Anything else?
I'm there.
All right, very good. All right. And now I've got my show title. I can copy paste this on down and the titles of these shows are going to come in. I could always go double check this, right? If I want to make sure this was working. Let's see, I could look at my second one here. Show 11 should be called Across Tomorrow Dispatches. I could just go to row 11 here and look with my eyeballs at show 11 and see what the title is. And it is in fact Across Tomorrow Dispatches. I don't know if I'd listen to that podcast. Maybe you guys would. All right, but that's how I can check that it's working. I can check if you want, if I want it. Yeah.
Difference between selecting a single cell and selecting the whole column.
Excellent question. So the first piece of information that you're giving it here is what specific row do I want it to go look at? So in my coffee example, let's go back to this. If I were to give it a whole column in that first argument, it's going to go look in the menu for this chunk. And it's not going to find this chunk because the menu doesn't have three repeats. The menu just has one thing listed once. So I want to give it, and that's what it's going to try to do anyways. It's going to get a little messy. That's actually not going to work, but that's what it's going to attempt to do. So you give it your one value because you know where your one value is, right? You're already in that row. The reason you give it the column for this one is you don't know where your value is, and you actually want Excel to do that work for you because you don't want to scroll that far. Yeah. So you're giving it the columns for the information you don't know where it is. But when you do know the row, meaning you're putting your formula in that row, you're just giving it the cell in that row. Does that help?
Yeah.
Good question. Any other questions about how we got our show title? Anyone getting an error on their show title? The only thing I might suggest to add, in this case, it looks like these are all good. These are all valid show IDs, meaning they all have a title. The only thing I might add here would be a little error message for what to do if I don't find a show, right? Let's say there's a show ID 9999, and I actually don't have that many shows, something went wrong. I might just include a little like podcast not found, something like that. Oh, I have an extra bracket in there, but it's all good. I'm not going to see that pop up anywhere because I wasn't having any errors, but again, just kind of a good practice to put something logical in there. Okay, we're gonna do another round of XLOOKUP. So hopefully these are starting to feel a little bit more intuitive. Okay, so we're going to do that next column over, this personal endorsement column. All right, you can ignore this for a second. We're just going to do our XLOOKUP to start. The XLOOKUP we want here is we want to know for each campaign for this show, is personal endorsement required? Okay. Is personal endorsement required? Which tab would I find that information on? Where am I going to need to look in my XLOOKUP formula? The personal endorsement tab. Yes, very good. So this tab has two columns. It has the campaign name and then a true or false for the personal endorsement for that campaign. And then in this tab where I'm going to be adding my formula, you're going to be adding this next formula right on next to this one, column F. This one also has column name. Hint, this one also has column name or add campaign name. Okay. So think about for XLOOKUP, what piece of information from each row do you want to go look up? Where might you go look up that information? And what piece of information might you want to return? So this is my latte. Where would I go check the price of my latte? Okay, so you should have another XLOOKUP formula in this column. That's your next task. Another XLOOKUP in this column. If you're feeling like XLOOKUP's getting really easy, you're welcome to try a VLOOKUP just to keep things interesting. Okay. You should have an XLOOKUP here. That is, this column should be full of true or false based on which campaign is in. Okay. All right. Give everyone a minute. If you're still feeling stuck, if you're still not sure where to start with XLOOKUP, give me a little wave.
This one here, I chose but for this one, I choose.
So for this one, you would want to adjust that. Okay. I see that. Go back to your show title. Okay, so this is, it looks like here Excel is being a little smart and recognizing your data at the table because, you know, here it says C2, but then here.
Yeah, because I format this table after like
Got it.
I did this.
Yes. Okay, great. So if you're in that case, it's like doing the table recognition for you, meaning that question that you just asked kind of becomes irrelevant because it's kind of handling that for you when you have it formatted as a table.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this will be like a shortcut.
Yeah. You can think of it that way. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is totally right.
You tell me. So you could go check that by looking for campaign DoorDash 41. You could go look at your eyeballs this one and see if that's supposed to be false.
Yes.
Great. And you can maybe scroll down and find one more. Macy's is true. Great. Okay, cool. Yeah. So the format of this table changes a little bit. wave. Okay. Who's got personal endorsement working? Someone who hasn't already given one today. Yeah.
It's equal sign, X lookup,
X lookup.
left parent, yeah. B2,
B2. All right, I'm selecting B2 because that's the name of my campaign. That's the piece of information I'm going to go look up in my menu. Very good. Keep going.
and go to see the personal endorsement sheet,
Yep. Do my
And,
comma, go to my personal endorsement sheet.
which is like the similar to B2's, like it's A to A, so it's
Perfect.
personal endorsement A to A.
Yep.
And to find what value I want to got, that is personal endorsement B2B.
Hmm?
And
Because
then-
when I see DoorDash campaign, I want the
I
true
want-
false
yeah.
for that campaign. Very good.
then right person.
All right. Beautiful. Hit enter. Okay, and I get a false for this campaign. DoorDash 41 should be false. Again, I can just go check that. DoorDash false. That looks good. All right, and then I'm gonna copy paste this on down. Now, in this case, it looks like my sheet is sort of sorted by campaign already. So just to kind of gut check that this works and just doesn't always say false for some reason, I'm gonna scroll down to a different one. Let's see, it looks like Macy's 715 is true. I'm gonna go just look with my eyeballs over here. Macy's 715 is true. All right, looking good, looking good. All right, again, I could choose to add a little piece of text here that just says something like what to do if this is not found. So that what's happening if I can't find a result here would be campaign not found, something like this. Again, kind of optional, but kind of a nice touch. Also a good reminder to future you about what this formula is doing. Okay, great. We're scrolling on down. Okay, cool. So we've got values for all of those. Next, we're gonna do, we're gonna make a nest with this formula. All right, so we're gonna go back to combining formulas. What we wanna do is, if personal endorsement is required, we want to replace that text with a nice sentence like personal endorsement is required. Right, you could imagine if I were gonna use this sheet to like send a mass email to all these podcasts and explain to them what they need to do for the campaign. I probably wouldn't want to put like false or true in the email. I would want to put a nice sentence like personal endorsement is required. Okay, so now that we have our X lookup already done, we're going to do an if formula in our column G. All right, so if we go in our formula builder and remind ourselves of our if formula, we used this last week. If is going to take 3 arguments. It's going to take a logical test, so a thing that could be true or false. And then it's going to take whatever you want the answer to be when it's true and whatever you want the answer to be when it's false. All right. So to use our if formula here, I'm going to come into my column G. I'm going to do equals if. What cell in this row am I going to check whether it's true or false? I wanted to check if something in this row is true or false. What would I grab? Not a trick question. F2, right? The result of my personal endorsement X lookup. All right, so if this thing is true, I just want to put in some nice text that says not required, something like this. And if it is true, or sorry, I have that order switched. First one is value if true. Good thing I've got my little pop-up reminder here that I can just look at, right? Logical test, value if true. I'm gonna put something like personal endorsement is required, just like a nice sentence like that. And then if it's false, some other more descriptive text, something like not required. Okay, so this is just me doing some kind of cleaning up some text, tidying up some text. Okay, good. I should get one of those two pieces of text, right? All this formula is doing is it's just operating in this one row. It's just checking if the thing in F2 is true, give me the first chunk of text. If the thing in F2 is false, give me the second. All right, pretty straightforward formula. Now, once we've got that working, we're going to do one more thing, which is combine our formulas. So as you might remember from our making our URLs at the beginning of class, right? We nested those formulas together, meaning we're going to give a whole formula as an argument to another formula. So one of our inputs here, one of our arguments here is F2, is just the cell F2. And our cell F2, of course, is where our XLOOKUP is happening. So something that I can do as a Excel combiner of formulas is I can nest these two formulas together and accomplish this whole thing in one column. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the XLOOKUP we wrote in our last step. It's going to come in my formula bar here and just copy this text, all of it except my equal sign. I'm just going to copy, right? Edit, copy, right? Make sure you hit enter after you do that so you don't mess up your formula. Then I'm going to come into my column G here, where I was just referring back to my cell F2, but instead of referring to another cell, I'm going to do that whole formula here. So I'm just going to delete F2 and paste in my whole XLOOKUP. All right, so I now have a equals if bracket XLOOKUP bracket, my whole XLOOKUP with all four of its arguments, close bracket, comma, and then my last two arguments for my if. All right, so all I did was I just pasted this whole XLOOKUP thing in from F2, where F2 was, and I'm going to paste this all the way down, and my results are not going to change, right? Because it's doing the same thing it was doing before when it was just looking at this cell, but I've just nested in my XLOOKUP. So it's doing these two formulas in my same cell. All right, does everyone see how the XLOOKUP is working with the if? Does that make sense? So my if is going to come in and it's going to say, which thing do I check whether it's true or false? And the thing to check whether it's true or false is this whole XLOOKUP. So then it's going to evaluate the XLOOKUPs, figure out if that's true or false. And then it's going to keep going with its if. It's going to say, all right, this was true, so I'll give it the first chunk of text, or it was false, so I'll give it the second. Right? Another example of nesting. Now, we first did these in two separate columns and then we nested them together. Again, that's what I would recommend that you do. As you get more comfortable with formulas, it'll sort of become more organic for you to know that you want to do two things and to type them all at once, but the parentheses and brackets and stuff can get a little confusing. So it's often good to do them separately and then paste them together while you're still getting used to it. Okay. All right. Cool. Okay, so some things to know about lookup formulas. The lookup array and your lookup key ideally should be some sort of unique value. All right, so this is where my coffee shop example was not great because those are, hopefully your menu items are unique, but it's not like an ID number or an email address or something like that, right? You could imagine if you're trying to do an XLOOKUP on a list of students from this class and students from another class, you would probably want to look at their student ID number or their email and not like their first name, because I might have put my nickname down in one class and my full name down in my other class, right? So you want to pick something that's unlikely to be abbreviated or misspelled, like an ID or an email. If you're not sure if your ID is unique, so in this case, our shows, if we look at our shows data, each show has an ID number. If, let's say there were two shows that had ID number 4, that would kind of mess up all my XLOOKUP stuff because I'm sort of assuming by using XLOOKUP that this ID is unique. So if you have a data set where you're not sure if that's the case, I would advise you to check if that's the case. One way that you can check, there's many ways you can do this, but an easy way in Excel is to select your column that you want to check this for. come up into in your home ribbon, your formatting section with your highlight cell rules. Okay, and mine is this like red and blue under conditional formatting. Highlight cell rules and just highlight duplicate values for data sets that are not completely enormous. Sorry, window in the way. I'm doing highlight cell rules, and then the rule I'm selecting is duplicate values. It'll ask me, what color and stuff I want to make it. Red is fine, so I'm just going to hit OK. And what this will allow me to do is just do a quick scroll through and see if it highlighted any cells in red, that would be a duplicate. Now this is looking pretty good. There are no duplicates, but let's just make one for the heck of it. Now there's 2 that are show ID 7 and they're highlighted. All right, so again, if you're using XLOOKUP, whatever your key and lookup array is, you want that to be unique. So you should just check that either by just using logic in whatever situation you're in, like student ID numbers we know are unique, or you can check in your data using something like highlight duplicates. I think Google Sheets does not have as easy of a highlight duplicate function, so it's a little bit of a pain for Google Sheets to do it this way. There's other ways to do it, but this is one quick way you can do it. All right, and then lastly is the data sorting piece. So this is what we looked at when we were looking at our episode upload dates. Just make sure that it's sorted in a logical way. So if your lookup, the data that you're looking up is going to have multiple instances occurring, right? So our IDs are unique to each show, but it makes sense that a show has multiple episodes. Just make sure they're sorted in that case, because by default, XLOOKUP or VLOOKUP is going to return our first time it sees that value. So this was the case where we sorted by most recent episode, because the sort of business context of what we were doing, that we wanted that most recent date. All right, we're going to do one last thing before we wrap tonight, which is to talk about cumulative formulas. All right, so we've talked about row-based formulas, we've talked about summary formulas, we've talked about lookup formulas. This is sort of one more category of formula that we're going to talk about, which is called cumulative formulas. This is the sort of thing where you keep a running total. Okay, so you could imagine if we go back to our coffee shop data, after this first customer, your running total is that you made $4. After your second customer, your running total is that you've made 4 plus 350, so $7.50 is your running total. After the third customer, you'd add another $7 and so on. Right, so that running total, meaning that you're sort of adding it on as you go versus just having a single total at the bottom. That is what we are going to add. Okay. The important concept that you need to know for how to do a cumulative formula is an absolute cell reference. Okay, I think we touched on these briefly last week. But what you'll need to do here is basically glue your reference to the top. What do I mean by that? So let's come over to our coffee data as an example. And let's say I want my cumulative orders after my second order. How much have I made so far? I might do something like this. I might do equal sum. We talked about this formula last week. And I might select my range, right? So I'm in this row here with my second customer. So I'm in row 3. And I'm just going to do the sum of this current customer and the one before it. All right, so my cumulative earnings so far should be my $7.50. All right. This might be look up out of the way for a second. Okay, so I'm going to call this running total. Here. All right, so my running total by the time this second person has ordered the tea is just the sum of C2 to C3. Now, what's my running total going to be after customer 3? What range am I going to want to add up here? C2 to C4, right? Because for this one, I'm adding up C2 to C3 to get my total for after my third customer, I'd want to add that up. So, great, I'll just copy paste to this formula on down. So I'm just going to drag or copy this one on down. Okay, so now it's saying that my running total is $10.50. But that doesn't really make sense because since our second customer, someone ordered a $7 drink, right? So I'm losing some money here. So if I look at what this comes up in my formula bar, it's only adding up C3 to C4. So it's essentially forgotten about customer 2 who ordered, or customer 1 who ordered the coffee. It's now only counting the tea and hot chocolate together. So as we've noticed with other formulas, when you copy paste down in Excel, it's bringing those cell references down with you, right? Because typically you want, you know, your B2, B3, et cetera, you want your formula to refer down with you, right? If we go back over to any of the formulas we just wrote for this last thing, right? Our formula is A2 is our first argument, next row is A3, next row is A4, right? Typically we want it to do this. Here, we don't really want it to do that. We want it to keep C2 in that same place and just keep adding on below, right, for cumulative formulas. So this is a place where we're going to do what I call glue the reference to the top, or in that case, just say, hey, stay locked onto C2, and then just add anything below it as I come on down. The way we lock C2 into place here is with dollar signs, okay? So you're gonna do a dollar sign before the C and a dollar sign before the 2. And then we're gonna try again to copy. So leave C3 as it is, but we're gonna have dollar sign C, dollar sign 2, leave our C3 as it is. And now I'm gonna copy paste this down again, right? So before I just did a copy paste, I'm gonna do the same old copy paste right now. And now I'm getting 1450. Why am I getting 1450 on the second copy paste? Because now if we look in this cell, we see it's keeping anything that has the dollar sign is not going to change as it goes down. So meaning it's not going to be dynamic, it's going to be absolute, sort of set in stone. So those dollar signs really lock it in place. Because I've come down to row 4 in my sheet, see my second cell in my range, C4, has followed me down, right? It's come down with me. So now I'm referring to these 3 cells instead of just these 2, right? Whereas when I didn't have it locked in, it said, oh, you just want to add this row and the row above it, and this row and the row above it, and this row and the row above it, all the way down. All right, so if I copy paste this down one more time, we'll see that now it's going to look from C2 to C5. All right, because it's going to keep that C2 no matter what I do. I could drag this like all the way down, right? And even down here in row, 19, it's still starting from C2, and then it's going to sum all the way from C2 down to C19, okay? And all I did to accomplish that was put a dollar sign before the C, dollar sign before the 2 to make C2 that absolute reference. I wanted to say locked on C2, and then otherwise come on down the row. That concept makes sense, kind of a concept of a running total. Okay. Excellent. All right, so absolute cell reference of cell B2 would be dollar sign B, dollar sign 2. It's referring to that same cell B2. It's just saying always look there. Don't change this. So we are going to try adding, or I guess this will be maybe your homework, or there's no homework for this. This is a non-credit workshop, but do whatever you want. If you wanted to try out doing a cumulative formula, this is what I would recommend. This is on that tutorial page that you're following along on also. So on our campaign participations sheet, we would need to get our each show's monthly downloads number. That's just as easy as getting the title. That's just a quick XLOOKUP. You guys already know how to do that. We want to figure out how much revenue we're making as each show joins the campaign. So to figure out how much revenue a show makes based on its downloads, we can use the CPM number. So in our campaign participation, there's a CPM value. This is a currency value. All right, currency is a little better. All right, this is a dollar value. CPM stands for cost per mil, meaning cost per 1,000 downloads. All right, so if my show has a $38 CPM, that means every time that ad gets downloaded or someone downloads that show with that ad in it 1,000 times, I get paid $38.26. All right, so from the CPM and the downloads, you can figure out the total amount of money involved in this ad campaign, right? How much is the advertiser paying for this ad on this show? You can figure out that's the revenue is the CPM times the downloads divided by 1,000, right? Because this is our cost per 1,000 downloads. All right. So that's how I can figure out my revenue for each line in each campaign, right? Each show, each campaign, how much revenue is being generated. And then I could add a cumulative revenue column using what I just described, right? So I could glue my top cell down and say, all right, always start at this top campaign, this first show to join this first campaign. And then as we add shows, as we add campaigns, add that on down. So we will start with this example in our next session. So if you want to take a stab at it, you have all the tools to do so. But we will start with this next time. Last thing I wanted to say is I would encourage you to practice anything that we're using in this class. If you're doing anything related to a spreadsheet for a class or an internship, try out some of the formulas we've been using. Something else you can try, which is kind of fun, kind of silly. You can ask AI to come up with some little exercises for you to do. So I tried this earlier today. I said, hey, create some sample exercises and sample data for me to learn XLOOKUP. Don't tell me the answer, but give me a spreadsheet I can download and practice and some prompts. And it gave me like 10 of them in one place. So something you can try if you're interested in locking this down. And we will cover this example in more detail next week. Thank you all so much for coming. We have 2 more weeks of this workshop next week, and then we're off for a week because this is my wedding. And then coming back the following week. I will hang out for a few minutes if anyone has questions. Cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Great. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you.